Happy Monday, man. You wake up and the coaches are talking about football. That is Doug Pederson and Ryan Nielsen. And I'll tell you what they said, and it's a lot of good stuff. We'll do it today here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars, and we thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of said podcast, and you can get that podcast for free on YouTube. All you got to do is go over and subscribe. All you got to do is hit the like button, and all you got to do is make sure you hit that bell so you get notifications each and every time you drop an episode. Also, if you're listening to podcasts like in the car or at work or wherever that might be, whatever platform that is, make sure you tap in every single day so you do not miss an episode of Locked On Jaguars. Today's Locked On Jaguars episode is brought to you by FanDuel. That's right, man. I've been telling y'all about FanDuel for a minute. FanDuel, make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. Shout out to the everydayers for joining me here every single day, and you could be an everyday or two. All you got to do is join us every single day. All right, let's not delay this any longer. By the time we finish this today, you will learn this. There aren't very many holes on this team, and that doesn't mean that I think the Jaguars have one of the best rosters in the league, but there aren't many holes, and maybe you'll even get one of those plugged up even more with a healthy Ventrell Miller competing at linebacker. We'll discuss that. Ryan Nielsen, really, the first day of camp is with the veterans, is mixing it up with players, and Doug Pederson says he'll really get in there and mix it up. But Ryan is also mixing it up when it comes to how guys are lining up and really emphasizing pre-snap. Why I think all of that is very, very good, because it has a tendency to make your football team have a higher IQ. We'll discuss that. But first, we'll start off with Doug Pederson, the head coach. We always said things fall on him. Whatever happens is his responsibility ultimately. So guess what? We're going to start with the man that we're going to blame everything on when things go wrong, right? So we might as well start with him and give him some credit. And I'm going to give him some credit for having everything feel like, and this comes on the heels of us being Jaguar fans and covering the team for so long. There are always sometimes you have to worry about whether you get this feeling like everything's together or not around here. And trust me, this is something that I don't think is unique just to Jacksonville. But if you're a fan of any sports or college team where you really into it all the time, and those teams are really good and they're run properly all the time, you have a tendency to get used to it, and then you think someone saying something like what I'm saying right now is just someone making something up. But oh no, make no mistake about it. If you have been a fan of an organization that over the last dozen years, maybe even longer than that has been run the way the Jaguars have run, you are always looking out for signs of some sort of infection. You're looking out for something that could possibly go wrong, because something always has gone wrong, right? And I know I get on people all the time for always thinking negatively, but this isn't really a negative thought. Let me explain why. You want things to be positive. You're just used to things being negative. You're looking around and not hoping to find something that's negative, but you're hoping not to find something that's negative. And the reason why you're that way is because you want to believe that finally this team is on the right track that's going to at least have them for a while on the road to going upward. That was interrupted last year because they stopped. How they handled that from this point forward was on the mind of a whole bunch of Jaguar fans. Was that just the speed bump on our way up? Did we just make some mistakes and misjudgments? Can we fix it? Did they fix it? Now where we're going. So there doesn't appear to be anything in Doug Pederson's demeanor that I saw today that would give me an indication that He doesn't understand exactly what they need to be doing and where they need to be going. It doesn't mean they're going to go. It doesn't mean they're going to get there. But it does. I think he has his finger on the pulse of the team. He knows what it is. He knows he's not lying to himself. He ain't trying to figure it out like last year. He ain't sitting there hoping that things are going to be right. When you listen to Doug Pederson talk, and you can find that video on JacksonvilleJaguars.com or on YouTube, Jacksonville Jaguars page. Doug Pederson talks like he has confidence, but he realizes that there are things that have to be done. There are things that they have to do. There's a way that they have to be. There are people that actually have to get better. Someone asked him about the presence of center Mitch Morse. Says he's been great. He's been a veteran, but he did not lack for mentioning this, is that he's been great with Luke Fortner. So there really is a competition at center. It's not just lip service. And I know most Jaguar fans realize this, but if Mitch Morse is what you think he is, he's going to win that job. Don't worry about it. He's going to beat Luke Fortner out. But what this is they're also not giving up on Luke Fortner. They're trying to make sure that Luke Fortner fights his way through this. And for that, that's going to help this football team. He also mentioned that the wide receivers are getting used. He can tell that there's a getting used to process. No one's getting hit. Mentioned BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr., and I got to make sure he's okay with us calling him that because it sounds too much like some stuff that was in the media. But Brian Thomas Jr. actually, I've heard him mention a couple of times there's some things that he has to get used to that he didn't do in college, but that's with every rookie. Of course, we all know that. But make no mistake about it, when you see the big, fluid athlete just running around on that field, he gives Trevor Lawrence something that Trevor Lawrence has not had since he's been here. I don't think offensively that there are many things or positions where you can look and say, yeah, they didn't address that. I don't think so. He even mentioned the tackle positions, talking about the three guys that they have, and Anton Walker Little as well as Cam Robinson. He mentioned the fact that a lot of teams don't have three guys like that. And now you add a fourth dude in, and then Blake Hance can also play in that position. Look, there's not a lot of room and not a lot of excuses for them to say, yeah, but we couldn't address that. Or, nah, we didn't do this. They have their ball club. They have their team. Now, to get here, they you know that and make no, don't get it twisted. The little headache, the little lump that they took last year, a lot of people would take 9-8. 9-9 if you include the playoff game, considering that they were banged up too. So I'm not being silly here. And I'm not being, because I know there's somebody going to say it in the comments, or they're going to hit me up on social media and say, man, you act like the Jags went 3-14. No, I'm not. And I really want us as a family, and I know everybody doesn't listen to the show every day, because if you listen to the show every day, you know I don't feel that way. The way I feel, though, is big picture wise, there are a lot of little steps that have to be taken in order for this team to get to where most fans sometimes want me to act like they're already there. All I'm saying is a lot of those little things that we talk about, I seem to think that they have answered those things, and specifically Ryan Nielsen. Doug Pederson mentioned that defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen really gets in there and mixes it up with the players. And then Ryan Nielsen spoke right after that and told a room full of reporters just how that mixing up is going, and how mixing up is a very, very appropriate phrase when you think about Ryan Nielsen, how he's going to play defense. And we'll talk about that here in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. First, got to let you know about today's sponsor, and that is FanDuel. It is winner take all in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. And if you had made a $5 bet yesterday and taken both road teams in those game sevens in the NBA semifinals, In the conference semifinals, you'd have won a whole bunch of money, and that $150 would have been placed in your account because you would have had a winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count. The NBA Finals, conference finals are set, so now all you have to do is get ready. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. Visit FanDuel.com to look at odds to include in your wager. Thank you for joining me here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. Talking Doug Pederson and Ryan Nielsen, who spoke to the media today. When Ryan Nielsen stood up, got to the podium, of course, he joked with everybody. Shout out to the guys. That's a good thing by him, too, to get to know the media, to know their lives and interact with them a little bit. Not that y'all care, but we care a little bit because it makes it easier to have conversations with people sometimes when you know they actually care, right? So shout out to them for that. But he was good today. He was really, really good today, and you saw why so many people, not even in the coaching profession, and not just the guys here who raved about him when they hired him, and not just the media here, but a lot of people I talk to around the league, guys that cover other teams that had some interaction with him one way or the other, they swore by Ryan Nielsen, especially Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, told me that Ryan Nielsen. And when you hear how his emphasis so far in day one is on the little things, you realize that the way he coaches backs up a lot of the ways that I like guys to coach and just approach football. Like, if you've heard the podcast a lot, you've heard me say, what are we supposed to be doing right now? Like, we always want to take a look at the big picture, but the big picture only works when you're doing the things right now that you're supposed to be doing, like today. So there's an interesting point today when he spoke where I heard him talking about, in fact, he said something. He said, we're working on lining up. We're working on a lot of pre-snap stuff where we don't have a depth chart, echoing what Doug Pederson has said about competition. We don't have a depth chart. We're working on pre-snap stuff. We're working on football stances and how to get in position. This tells me that this is not cookie cutter. And he used that word too. And he used it in the same vernacular that I'm using, where you can't be such cookie cutter when it comes to how you play defense. You have to look at the guys that you have. You like certain types of body types because those types of body types have certain athletic traits where you're going to be able to do this and do that, mix and match. What it sounds like to me is, you ever been to the store? It's another one of my analogies, y'all. You ever been to the store and you ever look for sponges? Now, I could talk about this in another way. I'm a barber, but I'm not going to do that. But when I say, if you ever picked up a sponge or bought new rags for your house, right? You touch them and you grab them. And the reason why you do that is because you're testing them for what is called porosity. And this is, like I said, this is a hair term that we use for color and chemicals. But I'm using this example here because when you test for porosity, anybody that does any cement finishing work or putting acid on floors or finishing floors knows exactly what I'm talking about right now. If the surface of whatever you're doing, and in this point, the surface is the human being, if they cannot absorb, you're testing them to see what they can absorb. You get the feeling that what Ryan Nielsen is doing and what Doug Pederson is doing, especially on the defensive line, is they have these body types, right? They have people that fit traits. And when he was talking about Cole, the kid that was drafted this year out of Texas Tech, this is exactly what I heard. They have the traits, they have the bodies. We have the traits and the body styles to do what we want to do. Now you got to get them in here. You got to test their porosity. You got to see how much they can absorb mentally, how much they can absorb or take physically, how much they can take, not just during these drills, but one thing that continued to be mentioned was, we're not in pads yet. We're not in pads yet. We're not in pads yet. And there's a reason that is very, very significant. If you think about it, a lot of folks, when we go out to practice and we report stuff, I get in arguments with people that say, man, I don't want to hear that until they get in pads. Nobody knows. I tell people all the time, you're not going to have the ultimate answer to your questions that you want until you see the guys in pads. I wrote it here on this piece of paper. You're not going to see the physicality of it. But that's not what they're doing. When we go out and report at the media reports right now, when the coaches talk, nobody's in pads. Nobody around the league is in pads. The collective bargaining agreement says they can't do it. Therefore, whatever we're supposed to be talking about is we're talking about at this stage. And Ryan Nielsen understood that because he kept bringing that up. We're not in pads. But at this stage, this is what we're supposed to be working on. This is a big picture. You work on and you eval and you do where things are, wherever your feet are right now. Like, you don't worry about, well, can you do this or can he do that? That's fan stuff. Right now, you got to worry about whether he does this or this or this, because even if they're good enough to do that ultimate thing, if they don't get this right now, they can't help us, because that's where bad play comes from. And I love the fact that they're paying attention to little details so far in camp. These are the little things. These are the things that they're supposed to be doing. A lot of times when you get into the regular season, you look and you say why are they making these mistakes 6 games into the season? Because they didn't properly work on it in May. That's why. I'm going to assume that all coaches do the things that Ryan Nielsen talked about the Jaguars are going to do today. I assume that they all do that. I just assume they all aren't real good at explaining it to you the way he did today, or mentioning it and bringing it up the way he did today. And that goes back to messaging and communication and style. I really, really do believe that for a guy to become a head coach or a coordinator in the NFL, even a position coach, he has to be good at communicating. But for a guy to be a champion and be great, he has to be great at communicating. And I think so far, so good. I think Ryan Nielsen is great at communicating. And if you're great at communicating, that means that there's a higher chance that whatever it is you're spitting, somebody's going to understand it easier. And if they can understand it easier and quicker, that means they can get about the business of doing it without having you have to tell them over and over again. See, it goes back to that term that I keep using over and over again, and that's what we do here on Locked On Jaguars. We familiarize you with things so that you know exactly when they come full circle. Remember when I said you have to know what your face looks like without looking in the mirror? This is what happens when things are properly communicated to you. You fully understand exactly what it is you're supposed to do. You fully understand what's expected of you. You fully understand how to line up pre-snap. The players can start coaching each other. Now it's about whether we go out and do it. Now, if we can't do it, it doesn't mean that we don't understand it. It just means we're not good enough. So now when you can start properly, this is almost like great communication forms a C-scan over your entire team. You start running out of things to point at when it doesn't get done, and you know exactly why you can't do it. Therefore, you're able to fix it. And that type of accountability is the only way we get to the big picture item, y'all. And the big picture item is to eventually be good enough to where you're not worrying about whether small things, or you're not worrying about whether the organization is doing those small things. And so far, so good with what I heard today. I really, really like what I heard today. I like how they're going to move guys around. And I like how they're not just teaching cookie cutter positions where certain guys are going to play cookie cutter positions. But I like how he talks about athletic profile and some of the other things that I really, really like that he talked about and discussed. That so far, so good with certain people. And one of those guys is Ventrell Miller. I'll tell you right now, if Ventrell Miller and guys like him can step up to the plate, they're going to create a situation where there aren't any holes for real on this defense. In fact, let's take a look at that in segment 3. I think he's the biggest candidate to fill a hole and to be a pleasant surprise. But we're going to go through and talk about a bunch of guys that can do that. Not before I tell you about Locked On Sports Today, because if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day, and if you have to turn the volume down with all of that shouting on certain days, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the yelling and screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube for free in the Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and your team every day. We're going to discuss holes on the defense and the ones that will surprisingly or could surprisingly be filled by certain players. We'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by the Gametime app. Don't worry, man, if you ain't bought tickets to an event, you think they might be all out, don't worry about that, man, because Locked On is hipping you up to Gametime. The Gametime app is the absolute truth. The schedule is out. Have you looked at those games? Do you know if you'll be able to get off work or not? If so, or if not, don't worry about it, because there's a priority with last-minute deals when it comes to Gametime. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Gametime understands stuff that other people doesn't, and they don't. And that means that sometimes things happen. So there's flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, the lowest price guarantee, even Gametime ticket coverage. Take out the guesswork of buying tickets with Gametime and download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, you got your third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We thank you all for making us your first listen. We've been talking about Doug Pederson, Ryan Nielsen, messaging, teaching the little things today about how players will line up. Doug Pederson and Ryan Nielsen both spoke at the first day where they got all the players in at off-season OTA. So I love the fact that they've been practicing so many pre-snap things. And there are players that I believe can really show, and everybody's going to get equal reps. Like I said, they both said that there's no depth chart, but players can equally show what they know and what they don't. And one guy I think will thrive in that. To me, he's sort of the what's that little point guard for? It's the little point guard for the Knicks, the little left-handed point guard for the Knicks, scoring all those points. That's who Ventrell Miller reminds me of. Because you look at Ventrell Miller, he's undersized. He ain't the fastest dude in the world, ain't the quickest dude, ain't the most athletic dude in the world. Jalen Brunson. But when given a shot, if he can stay healthy, in a situation where pre-snap coaches are watching your placement, how you lead guys, Ventrell Miller will thrive at that. He's an old school sort of linebacker, not the biggest. Everything he's ever gotten, he got it purely because of his instincts and because of his brain. He's going to thrive at being where you're supposed to be. He's just got to stay healthy. I saw a picture of Ventrell recently. He physically looks as good as I've ever seen him. That's why I think he can be a candidate to be one of those guys that can give you depth in the middle and eventually some really, really good minutes at linebacker lined up next to Foye Oluokun. Now, that's not saying anything negative about Chad Muma and certainly about Devin Lloyd. But if you just want somebody to do their job and play linebacker and do things the way you want them done, then that's your dude. And I think you have to have a good mix of glue guys like that to go along with all of those traits players. Now, if Devin Lloyd does his job, there's a chance that Ventrell and anybody else doesn't get a chance to see minutes because you can't line everybody up all the time. But Devin Lloyd is versatile enough that maybe you can see him on the field in a role where you still see both Ventrell Miller and, of course, Foye Oluokun, who is the defensive leader of this football team. But I got a feeling that if that kid is healthy, that is exactly the type of player. One of those guys, one of those others, one of those people that can pop up and give the sort of contribution to a team that's trying to find their way and find their identity and be one of those three linebackers. He can get the top three or top four, depending on how they mix it up and whether they put Lloyd closer to the line sometimes. I think if he's healthy, Ventrell Miller can definitely be one of those players. I'm looking for Devin Duvernay, Parker Washington. I'm looking for everybody to try to, hey, play me. Look, hey, coach, play me. That's the kind of effort that all of these dudes that we're talking about, since the coaches are saying there's no depth chart, we're asking these backup players. The Jaguar fans ought to be rooting for the backups, and that's not because you're rooting against the starters. But what it is the backups are going to do, they can do two things. They can take the starter's position, or they can be so good that it forces the starters to be even that much better. And while the backup doesn't take his spot, that all of that combustion, all of that friction elevates the franchise. And maybe you get a healthy, nice little rotation. And maybe somewhere all of that friction starts to shape and mold this team into having an identity that we don't even know exists. You can't choose your identity for the team. You can choose the direction, but the team and the coaching and the understanding and the smarts and the know-how and everything that you're trying to teach and all of these little things, all of these things that we take for granted and sometimes we don't discuss. Well, we discuss them now because we heard a little bit of it come through in the verbiage that Ryan Nielsen spoke with. And this is what people told me we were going to get. You're going to get a clear understanding of football. You're going to get a clear understanding of exactly what he's expecting of them. Therefore, when you see the product on the field, it makes it easier for you to know what's going on, man. If you know what the expectation is, if you know exactly what the coach is wanting, it kind of takes all of the guesswork out of, well, whose fault is it? And last year, and you guys know this, the last 2 years, man, we haven't been here. We don't know whose fault it was. You had dudes backing up. You had guys looking at each other, pointing at. We never knew if it was the defense, if it was the personnel, if it was the scheme, if it was. How many times have we heard them talk about we got to learn how to line guys up in the right position? And then later on, when guys got fired, you heard Doug say we got to be able to fix things on game day and not have to wait till we get to practice. Because trust me, when you fix them in practice, they're going to show you something else on game day, and you can't wait. You got to be able to fix it on the fly. Therefore, if you can identify that stuff early and know, then nothing will surprise you in games, and you ain't got to lose a game and then wait till you get to practice and work on something else. And then when you get there, you realize you worked on something that they're going to switch it up. And they realize, okay, they fixed it. They can realize that halfway through the second quarter or first quarter, yeah, they fixed it, but let's do something else. And now you do something else and all hell breaks loose because you can only do one thing at one time. Make those guys smarter. I like it. We're going to continue to take these gems and jewels that we're given every day with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm going to tell you why health is so important for this particular team this year. And we're going to talk about that tomorrow. And I'm not even talking about Trevor Lawrence. I'm just talking about in general. Of course, health is important for a quarterback. Why health is so important for this particular Jaguars team. We'll get to that tomorrow here on Locked On Jaguars. Make sure you guys stay tapped in to Locked On Sports today because it is the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with all the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. You guys be good, man. Take care of each other and continue to tap in here to Locked On Jaguars wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll make sure that we continue to pour into you. Until next time, take care. I'm Tony Wiggins with Locked On Jaguars.